I'm Ron Baker, Director of the Canadian Small Church Ministry Centre, and this is us, Canadian Small Churches in Action, sponsored by Small Churches Connection. And our guest today is a lady living in a place that is snowing. And you might say then, winter's almost here, but we look forward to this time together. And so I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her background, some of the things that she's been involved in, and some of the ministry that she's currently in as well. And so, Kathy, if you just want to take it away, and we'll see where we go from there.
Sure. So my name is Karhy, and I'm a registered nurse. I have been for a few decades. I graduated in 1979, so you can do the math there.
Mhm.
Um, I have worked in a number of different areas as a nurse, largely in the community. I did spend the 90s essentially in Mozambique with my husband as medical missionaries. And I think that's probably where we came from there. That's where the thing idea really germinated. I've worked in public health, I've worked in psychiatry, I've worked home visiting, and in all of those areas, there wasn't the same opportunity to marry my faith as a Christian and my nursing practice.
Mm.
They were always held separate, not on the mission field, obviously. And then when we came back from there, I was really hoping, or I could see that it would be a good thing to connect those two, because I do in myself, but I don't, um, or I couldn't in my nursing practice. It was frowned upon. Um, so at that point, I met someone who was a parish nurse, and we talked. And she was doing a course, so I said, "Well, I'm going to do this course too because I think this would be um, a great opportunity." So we did that together, and she went on to be a parish nurse, and I didn't. The Lord took me in a different direction. I continued with community care and then dementia care. I had an excellent job for about 12 years in a retirement home for people with dementia that was run by Christians. So I got my Christian connection there. Um, and then that ended, and the pandemic came, and that kind of gave birth to the parish nursing that I'm doing now.
Well, just let me ask you that the
Sure.
pandemic came. How did that give birth to a whole new avenue?
Well, because I had retired from my other position,
Mhm.
and I had been working full time and it was busy. Um, I had a lot of time on my hands as the pandemic broke, and um, we were trying to figure out as a church community how to do church given the restrictions that the government had put in place, certainly here in Ontario. And so I went to our pastor and I said, you know, can can I be of help? Um, there are ways to that I could apply my knowledge and skills to navigating what would be safe to do, what would be within the guidelines of the Ministry of Health and the Government of Ontario, etc., and still be able to be a faith community and function within the patient's church. And he, of course, asked. So off we went, figuring out how to navigate. And certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know as much as we did towards the end. So there were a lot more problems to solve and hoops to get through and hurdles that um, that we managed. And so from as soon as it was possible, right through, we were able to meet with some limitations. So that I kind of got that label of parish nurse
Mhm.
at that point. And then once the pandemic had ended, I guess, become endemic, um, we I went back to him and I said, you know, there are other things that I could help with. There are other ways that we could maybe use the parish nursing role within our church. And again, he said yes. So now I've got a little broader scope. Um, uh, in terms of being a nurse within my faith community.
Well, let's just ask the question, or let you define a little bit of what you see a parish nurse doing, and and I guess particularly in your situation, what you end up doing as a parish nurse.
Yeah, I think officially a parish nurse is a person of faith who functions as a nurse in a community of faith, where the idea of the whole person is properly addressed, so that the spiritual is considered. And we all know that our physical body can affect our spirit and our emotions as much as our spirit and emotions can affect our physical well-being. And so it's not it's foolish to think that they don't have an impact on each other, but it's being able to apply the gospel, the Christian faith, to my spiritual well-being and my physical well-being. So that's, I guess, a parish nurse who, it's like being a community nurse, but your community is a little more defined in some sense. And it's perhaps more walking alongside of people, and the people, how do I say this? The parishioners, the people in your church community drive they come to you, I guess, more so than your family doctor refers you to a community health nurse to go and check your blood pressure. It's a different way of connecting with the nurse, whereas I think at least in my case, it's a person in the community who would come to me and say, I don't know what to do about this, or I'm on occasion, I guess somebody else might suggest, maybe you should go talk to these people, go visit them and see how they're coping. So it's nebulous. Maybe that's the right word. It's not very well defined in terms of how it actually works out.
I like the idea that you said it's sort of a whole person type of dealing with the person, so that particularly, I suppose, as a parish nurse, it's much more open to talk spiritual issues and a number of those type of things. So if you were to look into what was originally planned many years ago, you said you and a friend of yours took parish nursing training. How has that changed over the years? Are there new avenues that are being looked at, or is it much the same, just different? Well, it's different years. Pandemics have gone on.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's much the same. I would say that perhaps the need is greater, as certainly around here the healthcare system is not in good shape, and understaffed, underfunded, complex, and so particularly for people who are elderly or frail or have some kind of chronic issue that is being well managed, there's a greater need for somebody to help them navigate that, I think. I think the need to combine faith and health is the same. That's always been the reality of living as a human being. So I think in some ways it's not changed at all, but it's more necessary, maybe.
Yeah, and I think we live in a whole different world in one sense than 1979, perhaps, when you graduated. I lived through those years as well, and I understand that there is a different approach and a different look at life, I suppose you could say. We've talked over the years then, from the 70s on, mental health has become a much larger area of concern. What are you finding as a parish nurse in relation to that whole area?
in my particular parish or church, there's some mental health concerns, um, nothing that's uh, or not very much that's diagnosed or well defined, but
Mhm.
certainly no shortage of people um, with issues that are would fall into the mental health bracket. Maybe not defined by them as that, but um, they're there. People feel discouraged, people feel overwhelmed, people are anxious, and I think they see uh, in the community of Ilderton, there's been a number of mental health concerns within the community, not necessarily in our church, but connected to people who are in our church. And so there's an awareness perhaps that's greater than it used to be, and um, a great freedom to identify mental health as um, a real thing, an
Yeah.
okay thing, uh, um, acceptable to say I have a mental health concern. Whereas in 1979 and even after that, there was much greater stigma and taboo attached to saying, I'm thinking like my life isn't worth living, or um, other other mental health issues
Yeah.
that have.
So let me ask. You've talked a little bit about your own parish. That I suppose your background in geriatrics and some other areas would be very helpful. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and do you find that that's a large part of your current parish nursing would be I would call an older demographic?
I would say it's probably between the elderly or older and the young. They're young, so we have quite a number of younger families in our church as well. So it's young moms with and
Ah,
children and issues around. My child has a rash, and I don't know what um, I don't know what it is. I don't know whether, what should I do about it? Do I need to go to emerge? Because that's usually the question.
yeah,
Do I have to go, or can we solve this problem without
right.
spending hours and hours waiting in emerge for, nothing, or just the answer that you would have got anyway, even from the internet. So it's talking through those kinds of issues with parents. Um, and some of it's just, yeah, that's okay, it's normal, this happens. I think there's also a people are um, less connected to their generations, so grandparents, parents, which is where most parenting information comes from in
Good
general.
point. Yeah.
And so people are are more mobile. They live a couple hours or farther from their mom and dad, and they start their family, and they have parenting questions, and grandma's too far away to be of much help. Um, and so I think there's a need for a substitute to help them with some of those questions that aren't difficult, but they're concerning.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so someone is thinking about the possibility of becoming a parish nurse. What would be the track, the path that they would need to take?
So I think the first thing would be to have your registration to be a registered nurse, or an RPN. I
Mhm.
think could also in that role. So you need the professional qualification, that skill set of nursing knowledge, the ability to assess people and look at um, signs and symptoms, and be able to see that this is a big problem. You need to go to the emergency. It's not a big problem. We can figure out some strategies to manage your, you know, nutritional health, for example, or something that is impacting your well-being. And then I did look, and the course that I took at McMaster is not being offered anymore. Um, Here in Ontario or in London, there's course with St. Peter's Seminary, but it's connected to a university in Dayton, all done online. So there's some formal education that you can do virtually, uh, or if you live in London, you can do it in person. Otherwise, the internet is your friend.
Yes,
And
yes.
and then I know that here in Ontario, the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario has a faith community interest group, and they do ongoing workshops, seminars, conferences. So there's that kind of information out there to take advantage of. And then there's a Canadian Association of Parish Nurse Ministries. So that's a national organization. Also has a similar. They're very helpful in their. They lay out. They have sample job descriptions. They lay out terms of reference, competencies. So they've really done a lot of legwork and groundwork in terms of how to make it fit, how to make it legal, professional, and be what's the word I want? Not proper, but so that the nursing practice has the framework and guidelines and all that kind of infrastructure that would be true of another practice. So if you lived in or you worked in a hospital, there would be all those things for your role in the hospital. So with parish nursing, you're much more an independent practitioner, but you need that framework as well to say, these are the guidelines. This is what's okay to do. This is how I maintain my professional qualifications, ongoing education sort of thing.
Now, having prepared or done that, my question often is, you move now to get leadership on board and coming along with you. How easy is that?
Well, when I first finished the course, that would have been in 2007, I think. I went to the pastor at the time and I said, I've done this, and it kind of just went flat. So I think partly because at that point in my life and career, I was looking for a paid position.
Yeah.
And the church couldn't afford it. At this point in my life, I don't need to be paid, so I can do it as a volunteer. So it makes it economically much more feasible. But I think also it's your church needs to be ready to consider the possibility of doing it and see the need of it. There's lots of literature. There's lots of books that have been written. So a person considering parish nursing could read those for themselves, and then maybe have church leadership read excerpts or parts of it to see how this would be of benefit. The other thing that in my case, I have been positioned with the soul care team that our church has. So people who are doing pastoral visiting and that kind of support. So I'm in that team with a extra qualification of healthcare, so that if someone's visiting somebody who's shut in because of circumstances and discovers that they're not so healthy, something's going on, then they might come and talk to me, or I might get assigned that person to visit because they know there's some health issues as well. So if there's maybe a point of value to say, if there was a parish nurse, then these kinds of things would happen with the pastoral visiting that's being done. Or if there was a parish nurse, this group of people in our congregation would have an extra support through a parish nurse, because he or she would be able to, help them with navigating the healthcare and making sure that their diet is good, making sure their medication is all in order, and they're not, under medicating or over medicating themselves. Even just, wellness checkers, their any physical symptoms, blood pressure, swelling, pain, that could be better managed with a nurse putting her 2 cents worth in there.
It certainly makes it a much more cooperative community type of approach, which I really appreciate. That oftentimes parish people within a parish tend to just think that there's nowhere else to go. What do I do? And then if a healthcare system isn't always generating as much help as you would like, they're kind of placed in a very difficult position. So I can see the parish nurse being a very wise and good thing for a council or for a church board to participate in. Yeah.
I think it happens informally in some circumstances. If you have a friend at church who's a nurse, then you might already be talking to her, and it's just making it formal sort of a thing to say, yes, it's okay to ask your nursing friend these questions, or there's a resource there for you that some people might have known about, but not everybody. And now we're going to say everybody can join in and get some help as they need it.
Well, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time here already. It seems to have gone way too fast. But I do have one question that I usually ask those that are on this podcast, and I'll let you just make up what you want to make up. It's just it's just the question. Is there one piece of advice that you would give to those in leadership in a small church?
I would say it's not about the numbers. As small is as good as big, and that the Lord is building his church in all the places that he's building it, big and small. And I think it's been true in my whole life. Trust the Lord's timing and direction, and just follow. Go where he takes you.
That's a very good piece of advice. I love it. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here and just giving us that sense of ministry that a parish nurse can have. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.